I got called into the office of one of my clients as a chief marketing officer of a $4 billion food company. And the reason for the meeting was to really dress me down about a recommendation that I had made that hadn't worked. And so he's like, hey, you recommended that we do X. We did it. It didn't work. We lost a bunch of money. And you should feel really bad about yourself. That's not what he said, but that's how I felt about it. And
welcome to Men of Abundance, the podcast for those looking to level up their lives by hanging out with some of the greatest leaders and established professionals in our community, living a life of integrity, honor, and the abundance mentality. Prepare to pay it forward with your host, former Army medic turned lifestyle entrepreneur, Wally Carmichael.
What is going on, Men of Abundance? I am Wally Carmichael, your founder and host of the Men of Abundance podcast, the Pay It Forward community, proving to you that you can, in fact, live a life of abundance and prosperity in family, faith, finances, and fitness. I just cannot wait to introduce you to our featured guest today, but before I do, you know I want to give you the opportunity to be abundant in your actions today by paying it forward and sharing Men of Abundance with everyone in your community, and I do mean everyone. Take a screenshot of your phone, share that on Instagram, share it on Facebook, share it on Twitter, hashtag MOA, hashtag Men of Abundance. And if you really want to take it to the next step, if you're getting something out of these conversations, then share that with me. Share it on iTunes or share it even on your favorite podcast player, whichever one you're listening to this on. Leave a rating and review so that others can find it. But I love reading those because it gives me feedback on what I'm doing, and maybe I can make some adjustments here and there if I care to. I mean, after all, it is my show, but it's for you. It's for you so that you too can figure out how to live your life of abundance, whatever that means to you. And for those of you out there who are business owners, make sure you get subscribed to the Business Owner Growth Podcast. New episode drops tomorrow. Be sure to subscribe to the Business Owner Growth Podcast to ensure you get every single episode. I got some bombshells coming down, and I am going to be interviewing some amazing business owners for that show. Originally, I didn't plan on doing interviews, but I just can't get away from it. I absolutely have to share these stories with you on the Business Owner Growth Podcast to help you in your business. Today's featured guest is Eddie Yoon. He has been a growth strategy expert for at least 20 years as a partner with the Cambridge Group. In the last 5 years, he has helped double numerous businesses: cable media company, food brand, beverage company, pet food brand, consumer robotics, just to name a few. He has helped grow these companies from several $100 million to close to $1 billion. Eddie is the author of the acclaimed book, Super Consumers: A Simple, Speedy, and Sustainable Path to Superior Growth. He has also written over 40 articles in publications like Harvard Business Review magazine. Eddie has been a keynote speaker in the U.S., Africa, Australia, Denmark, UK, and Japan, and is now focused on helping business owners drive growth while maintaining a healthy balance between work and personal life, which may have something to do with the fact that his daughter wrote a book about him that really opened his eyes. I'm not sure. We'll see. Men of Abundance, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Eddie Yoon. Eddie, welcome to Men of Abundance, brother. How you doing?
I'm great, Wally. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. As I was talking pre-show, it's Interview Valet really sends me some amazing guests. They introduced me to you, and your daughter's amazing book. That was very amazing the way they sent that over. Was that part of your idea?
No. Tom Schwab, his brilliant idea to send it with the balloon, and so all credit to him. So.
Oh my goodness, Tom is just amazing. Tom and Karen, the whole team over at Interview Valet is just absolutely amazing. And guys listening, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, I get this box. I forget who dropped it off, Amazon or USPS or somebody. And the box opens up, and as I open the box up, this yellow balloon comes floating out. And it was just the most amazing thing. And it was attached to Eddie's daughter's book, which I read in just a couple of minutes, then promptly gave it to my son, which is around here somewhere. So it's just beautiful. It's absolutely a great introduction to you. And I just absolutely love the whole process. I love working with them anyway. What's been your experience working with them, Eddie?
Oh, it's been great. So they were pretty instrumental for me. My career changed. So I've been a career growth strategy consultant, and I was a senior partner at the Cambridge Group for 18 years. And about 2 years ago, I went out on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of that, Tom and the Interview Valley folks were really helpful for me to make the leap. I had a book that I had written with the Harvard Business Review, and they had got me a bunch of exposure on different podcasts and, quality shows like yours and whatnot. And that was really a big boost for me to feel confident to, kind of hang up my own shingle and do what I do now.
Well, good for you. That's a great story, man. And where are you at in the world right now?
I am on the Big Island, actually, of Hawaii. So, I was born and raised on Oahu. I went out to school in Chicago, met my wife, and sort of working there. So we're not leaving anytime soon because our kids are in school there. But we've since I've especially gone out on my own, I've been able to kind of define work-life balance how I want. So we're trying to spend summers down here is what we're doing.
No, yeah, great. My family and I had the opportunity to live on Oahu for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And, man, we made it over to the Big Island. The first time we did, we seriously considered moving to the Big Island. And we just decided logistically, I mean, you think about country living, that's country living on steroids. I mean, Seriously, you really got to have your stuff together logistically to live on the Big Island.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hopefully no medical emergencies, because then you have to get on a plane to Oahu or whatnot.
Absolutely. I mean, we were even looking at things like the cars, certain car parts. If you have an older car, it's going to be hard to get over there. Everything's already more expensive because of delivery to, Hawaii in general. But, we were dealing with that. That's no big deal. In fact, cost of living for housing anyway was a little bit lower, a lot lower on the Big Island.
Yep, that's
but
true.
Then you got all the zones for the insurance. And we were just like, no, we're good. We'll just continue with what we're doing. But we ended up moving to Florida, so we enjoyed it here too.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
awesome.
Nice. And I got to tell you, the other thing that really intrigued me about connecting with you specifically with our connection in Hawaii is your website, and basically it's entitled Eddie Would Grow. And immediately I thought Eddie would go, and I just knew it. And I looked it up and I was like, yep, sure enough, that's it. So I dig that we're going to get more into that here in just a minute, but that was very intriguing, and I just knew we'd connect real easy.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So I like to start out with an attitude of gratitude, brother. What do you have to be grateful for today, other than currently being on the Big Island?
That's a lot of it. And so,
I know.
Yeah, it's I feel grateful that much of my career has been about being a good student of consumers so that you can identify opportunities for businesses. And one of the things that I've kind of recently been turning on to through a counselor was, how do I be a good student of my family and friends, and kind of understanding what it is that makes them tick, what turns them on, what turns them off. And I think realizing that some of the skills that I've built over a career that have been very helpful for me are actually even more valuable on a personal level. In ways that I don't think I really fully understood that I needed. I think that's been a real treat for me to be kind of turn my vocation into kind of a personal mission from a family standpoint. So that's been something I've been grateful for. That's
absolutely amazing. It's very similar to part of my story as well, and just being so, oh my goodness, just obsessed, with my professional career in the Army, and then on the side, business, because I've always been intrigued with business strategy, human nature, human strategy, and I just spent so much time in that category and didn't spend a whole lot of time on my own personal family strategy, if you would, which is where all this abundance mindset and this abundance journey came from. So I'm glad that got us connected for sure.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad you figured that out as well.
Well, I'm still learning, so hopefully.
Oh, aren't we all? There's no doubt about it. Again, why I like to have these conversations a couple times a week to help me learn even more. Absolutely. So how would you describe yourself, Eddie?
Yeah, I feel like, career-wise, I'm a guy that helps companies grow. So For the better part of my career, I spent, largely Fortune 500 companies, helping them grow their businesses, any kind of consumer-facing business. And then in the last few years, it's been helping entrepreneurs grow their businesses. And so kind of taking the same skill set that I have, but kind of up-and-coming companies. And that's been very fulfilling. And I think trying to figure out, what was intriguing to me, Wally, about your show, and just even the theme of abundance is that's largely some of the underlying principles of what I have done at work, is that if you have kind of a abundant mindset, then you have different growth strategy that comes to mind. Mm-hmm. If you have a zero-sum mindset, then, which I find that 9 out of 10 executives that I work with have that mindset, then there's a very different type of way to grow that's actually not very sustainable. In that, at some level, what I've been, probably a lifelong student, may be the short answer to your question, because I've been blessed to see how different companies have grown over the years, but recognizing kind of slowly but surely the underlying principles underneath each of that, of which, abundance is one, generosity is another, the ability to kind of grow the pie versus split the pie. These are all kind of fundamental ideas that have been true throughout all of my clients that have successfully grown their businesses, but also I think true of kind of life in general. And that's been kind of a neat exploration for me.
Oh, absolutely. When you can grow both professionally in your business and personally, I mean, to me, that's success. That's when you start getting into significance. Now, I was watching a video of you, and you mentioned something that's right in line with what I talk about, and specifically with having an abundance mindset, is you can grow your business without taking from your competitors down the street. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I 100% agree.
Yeah, no, it's been kind of fascinating, and some of it, I would say, I've just kind of stumbled into. So I had the good fortune of working with companies that were market leaders. So you think about over my career, Anheuser-Busch in the U.S., 1 out of every 2 beers was one of theirs, or Gillette, 70% global market share of men's shaving, or even, one of my favorite was a company called Incinerator, garbage disposals. They have a 95% market share in the U.S., which is pretty amazing. Yeah. And when you have that kind of leadership, it's really hard to grow by stealing from competitors, right? Because there just aren't that much left. And so you really have to figure out, how do I, in fact, make the category bigger? And there's kind of one of 3 levers. It's you can bring new consumers into the category. You can get them to buy more units per person, or you can raise the price per unit. And kind of like that, the algebra of category growth became this is a lot simpler to think about, not easy to execute, but simpler to think about than people realize. And then the consulting firm that I was at was acquired by Nielsen, the global consumer data company, 9 years ago. And I got access to all this data. And kind of what I found was interesting was that companies that were actually able to grow the category, so take yogurt as an example, that category has more than doubled in the last 10 years. And what they end up finding is that the market leader who is able to grow the category captures 80% of the upside. So effectively, 1% of the brands capture 80% of the category growth. And so I just started to kind of realize that there's this common pattern that most companies that I run into, they're trying to grow the wrong way, because taking incremental market share points from somebody is really, really hard. And that it's actually kind of fixates you on the wrong things, because it makes you think about, how do I copy a competitor's product? How do I undercut their pricing? Just things that aren't really helpful to anybody but yourself. Right. Versus an abundant mindset of, well, how do I make the pie bigger for everybody? Then that causes you to innovate and run your business in a very different way of how do I create new stuff that makes people who didn't want to enter the category come into the category? Or how do I get people to actually want to consume the category more? Or what needs to be true for somebody to pay twice the price that they normally pay, which sounds kind of outrageous. But if you actually think about what would I need to give you benefit-wise for that to be true, then you come up with a different mindset that actually is a nice win-win for everybody.
Yeah. So let's back up just a little bit, because I'm totally geeking out on all this stuff right now, man. And I can tell you right now, guys, that this conversation might take a different route than what you're used to, just because I'm really geeking out on Eddie's content, and I've already done the research, and I really enjoy it. So category. That's something that's a little bit different. I don't hear most people talking about, as opposed to branding, and get away from the branding idea and really decide what category you're in or create a category. Let's expand on that a little bit, because what I'm thinking of right now real quick is, as you say, the abundance mindset and charging more. I'm thinking of Starbucks. Now, Starbucks took a thing that you could, a cup of coffee you could normally pay prior to that 50 cents a cup for, at anywhere else, maybe $1. And now you start seeing people pulling trailers behind their truck and parking somewhere and selling coffee for $5 a cup, a large cup. So that's an idea of that. Am I way offline on that?
No, you've totally got it right there. And what I love about it is that coffee is a category that has been reinvented or created anew several times. And that's actually very helpful, Wally, because what I often tell people is that you don't have to, create a new element on the periodic table. Like, it's not like I've totally discovered a new category that never existed before. What I talk about a category and creating a new category is when you've created maybe an old version of something new, a new version of something old, where it's a breakthrough innovation on the product itself, coupled with a breakthrough innovation on the business model. And Starbucks is a great example. Coffee existed before Starbucks, but it's a totally different experience because you can customize it how you want. And the business model is such that they make money on coffee for sure, but they sell a whole heck of a lot more milk than they actually do coffee. And no one thinks about coffee as a milk company versus a coffee company. And the second part is, if those of your listeners that have a Starbucks app, I don't know if people realize that Starbucks is actually a good-sized regional bank, that they have at any given time $1 billion of cash loaded on the app. That is an interest-free loan that we as consumers give to them. And, no one really thinks about them as a financial services company. And that's kind of the brilliance of the power of what they've built. And I that's kind of what I think about, is that doesn't have to be completely brand new, but when you've created an experience that is so different that, you know what, if I couldn't get a Starbucks, I don't really have a backup option. Like, that's the kind of idea of non-substitutability. That's what I'm really getting at. And it's almost like a higher bar for running a business, that if you actually reach for the stars in that regard, that you'll get much farther than, hey, how do I just take, Wally's business and make it part of mine? Because that's just kind of a lose-lose in the long run.
Right. Yeah. Wow, it's just brilliant. And I love the whole idea behind it, because it really is a win-win. You can create an entirely different category. What are some other industries that you'd be able to do this with?
Well, I mean, it's a great question, because I've been struggling to find an industry that you can't do it with, because, so you take like robotic vacuum cleaners as an example, right? So everybody, at some point in time has to vacuum. A lot of people have vacuums. How would something like a Roomba actually be necessary, especially when it costs several times more, hundreds of dollars than a regular vacuum? And, the idea being something as mundane and actually as unpleasant to think about as vacuuming. There's been a new category there, because what the Roomba does is that it allows you to vacuum multiple times per week or even daily, which is kind of a different thought. So there are people who their standard of cleanliness is not that high. That might be one of those people. And, that's good enough if I do a quick vacuum every now and then. But my wife is someone who is a vacuum super consumer. We have 8 vacuums, actually, of all different types and sizes, because she likes them. Just like a golfer doesn't have one golf club. She likes vacuums and the like. And that the Roomba, what it does is the people who are vacuum and cleaning super consumers, what they believe is that the world is not clean and dirty. It is just all varying levels of dirtiness, and that you never actually get the cleanliness at any point, but you try. And that what the Roomba does, it allows you to vacuum daily, maintains the cleanliness that you have a little bit longer. And that's just a different way of thinking about the category. And one of the things that I've talked about is that, we brush our teeth daily. We take a bath or shower daily. Why don't we vacuum daily? And that's the kind of mindset that they're creating, that I suspect in 10, 20 years, that'll be kind of the norm. Is like, whoa, there was a time when people didn't vacuum every day. That's kind of weird and stuff. And so that's kind of the course of innovation. And this idea of creating a new category is, at the end of the day, it's really about how do I make people's lives exponentially better and unlock the desires of their heart that maybe they didn't really fully know that they had, but through some real breakthrough innovation and different kind of growth strategy, you can figure out how to get there.
Yeah, again, I'm kind of chuckling to myself as you say that about the vacuuming daily, and it's brilliant that they came up with that, because my wife is the one that's, quite frankly, we got to vacuum every day. Every day you got to vacuum. Somebody's got to vacuum, and so we keep talking about getting a Roomba or one of those robotic things, so we don't have to do it. And I guarantee you, if we get the robotic vacuum, we're still going to be vacuuming every day.
Absolutely,
because it's not going to hit every spot. That's for sure. I'm absolutely positive of that. Just because of the way the house is built, I'm like, how in the heck would it get over there? So, yeah, we'll definitely have to do that. Well, one of the questions I like to ask, and one of the conversations I like to get into, is the kick in the gut moment, Eddie, and that is because anybody who's doing anything or not, you have kick in the gut moments, and some of us come through it with shining stars, and some of us don't, and there's others in between. But if you would, share with us one of those kick in the gut moments and really make us feel that.
Yeah, I had there's actually a bunch to choose from. So I have three that come to mind. The first one is early on in my career, about a third of the way through. I got called into the office of one of my clients as a chief marketing officer of a $4 billion food company. And the reason for the meeting was to really dress me down about a recommendation that I had made that hadn't worked. And so he's like, hey, you recommended that we do X. We did it. It didn't work. We lost a bunch of money, and you should feel really bad about yourself. That's not what he said, but that's how I felt about it. And I was early enough in my career where it really kind of threw me for a loop. I was like, man, does what I do really add any value? We took fees from this client and it didn't work. And it caused me to kind of reflect back on my career. So I went back through every project that I ever had, and I started to journal. And that's one of the things that I've really kind of taken away, is that journaling your career in particular is so valuable, because I went through literally every project that I ever did. And I tried to figure out, did I recommend something that worked? Did they learn something? Did they actually get a result that was 10 times greater than what we had charged them as a firm? And what I realized was that at the highest standard of they learned something, they did something, and they got a 10x return, that was about a third of the time. And if I was playing baseball, that's pretty good, but I wasn't feeling great about it from a consulting standpoint. Mm-hmm. And I really kind of figured out, what is it that actually were the common themes through those times that it didn't work, and how do I kind of make that the norm versus the exception? And that's one of those gut punch moments that I really felt like drove me to a level of a personal standard of excellence that I don't think that not everyone that I knew in the field had. The second one was my wife and I. We had two kids at the time. We were debating having a third kid, and I was up for partner. And I was like, "Well, I really kind of want to do this." And she was like, "I don't think that's a good idea. It's going to be hard on the marriage and hard as a dad." And partly, I felt like there was this kind of choice that I had to make about my career versus my family. And what I realized was, you know what, there is a way out where you can have both, but I couldn't just be, quote, a run-of-the-mill, partner. Like that's kind of the pinnacle of my career profession. But what I really needed to be was somebody who could set the price. I would be so expert in my chosen field that I could kind of dictate the terms in which I could or didn't want to work. And that was a big kind of like, in order for me to be a good husband, a good father, and have a career, I needed to actually achieve a little bit level of a higher goal that I had there. So that kind of moved it up. And then the third one was, you alluded to it, when my middle daughter wrote her book. So it was a 6th grade English project, and her English teacher emails us and was like, "Hey, your daughter Audrey wrote this book, really quite something. I think you ought to look at publishing it." And I'm reading it, and it's about a workaholic dad who nearly loses his family. And I was like, okay, is this about me? And she denies it, of course. But then, what was interesting, when I shared it with other people, they were like, well, they always ask, is she writing about you? And I'm like, well, she says no. But the question always becomes, well, it could be about me. And I think, thankfully, I had left my job as a partner the year prior. So at least I have some plausible deniability that I had made some choices before that. But again, kind of all along the way, I felt like each of these gut punches. I felt like I was at a crossroads of, do I kind of settle and give in, or do I kind of try to find the third way that didn't exist yet? And I think they've all been painful experiences, but have made me really rethink, well, how do I, as we talked about, create a new way or a new category of doing my career such that I can have my cake and eat it too? And I think that's kind of that abundance mindset that you talk about there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all about that. I always get these either or questions. I'm like, why not both? And speaking of that, here's a question for you, because being in the business strategy industry and doing this kind of stuff, profit or grow or both? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, really, really good question. I'm with you. It's not an either or, it's a both and. Now, sequence matters, right? And so now one of the things that, this one, there's actually more than one way to skin the cat, is that I think depending upon, how you want to run your business and kind of, I think one of my friends, Christopher Lockhead, wrote a great book called Play Bigger, and he distinguishes between capital E entrepreneurs, like you're trying to create the next Facebook or Google, versus lowercase e entrepreneur, where you're trying to be a solopreneur, which is what I am now. Like and I think if you're a solopreneur, I think it's really important that profit comes first, in that, you know what, you're not trying to take on the world. You're just trying to, redefine your career. I talk about it as a personal IPO, right? Where I have my career, but I've kind of maximized the full value of what I do on my own terms. And, my consulting business right now, I have no fixed cost. All of my, I work with contractors. They're all variable costs. And I've ensured that no matter what my revenue is, that my profit potential, as it were, is always going to be there. Now, if you're a capital E entrepreneur and you are actually trying to change the world, there might be a situation in which you kind of have to go profit negative and, for the sake of trying to build something that's pretty amazing or a new category that's out there. And hopefully you have enough capital and the right strategy to build that out. But those are the kind of distinctions. But I agree with you that it is both and, but depending upon your capital E or lowercase e, sequence might be different.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've got my son and his friend out here, and my dog losing his mind. So here's some barking.
No worries.
So that is a great way to put that. I had never really considered the capital E or the lowercase e, and it makes perfect sense because I too am a solopreneur, and quite frankly, I don't want to grow beyond what I'm willing to do, because I'm still living the Aloha Friday everyday lifestyle, and I only work with select people. I don't want too much grief in my life, and I'm not going to invite. I'm going to get enough without inviting it into my own life, right? But then, it really kind of reminds me of the it's a fable or a story or something I've heard. It's in The Prosperous Coach, I think, is the book that I've read, and I heard it even before that. But if you reference it, guys, there's a story about the American businessman walking on the beach, and he runs into a local guy who's pulling his boat in with a load of fish. And the American businessman says, "What are you doing?" So I just got done fishing. I'm going to go sell some of it, and I'm going to hang out with my buddies on the beach. And then later on tonight, I'm going to have dinner with my wife under the stars. He goes, "Man, you should expand. You should grow." And the bottom line is the American businessman wants him to grow and have a fleet of boats and factories and all this stuff. And the guy's like, "Why would I do that?" "Well, so that someday you can enjoy your life on the beach and eat dinner under the stars." And it's like, no, dude, that's good for, and that's fine. That's good for some people. But some of us are just happy helping enough people to live a good life ourselves.
Absolutely. No, I totally resonate with that story, that parable. And what is kind of interesting is, I think to your point, I'm the same way. So when I was a senior partner at the Cambridge Group, I had anywhere from 3 to as many as 9 clients at any one given time. And, the way that consulting works, it's very much like a teaching hospital. There's a little bit of a bait and switch where the senior partner adds the most value, just like the chief of surgery adds the most value in a teaching hospital. But, oftentimes when, let's say you go to a teaching hospital, famous one, you have a weird pain, you're kind of scared, and you meet the chief of surgery and you're excited, and then you wake up, it's a first-year med student standing over you after your procedure. You're like, that didn't feel good. And so now, to your point, like I've kind of flipped the model where most of my I only take on one or two clients at any given time. Just in the way that you're describing, Wally. Like I don't want to overextend myself, but also part of the value proposition is it's senior partner attention, and I don't feel good about the kind of old school bait and switch anymore, right? And so, and I think that this idea of having the faith to believe that the abundance will be there, whether it's because you've put in the time and you built a track record over the years, and or you continue to work on your craft, where regardless of how much you choose to monetize it at any given time, that your commitment to being the best at what you do in your lane is so ever present that you have the confidence and the belief that if you work on your craft and you continue to hone that the opportunities will come and you don't have to chase everyone down. And that's obviously easier said than done, and something that I have to remind myself over time. But that's exactly the mindset of I'm going to be the greatest fisherman that I can, so that I don't have to worry about expanding and building boats, just like the story that you told and stuff.
Well, yeah, and it's also about living, creating your lifestyle so that you can live within your means. I mean, as a business and life strategist, I've put myself in the same category as, say, Tony Robbins, but I don't want to be Tony Robbins. I don't want to travel all the time. I do want to live on Fiji, but that's a whole different conversation. But I had some good experiences with some guys from Fiji when I was in Egypt. But in any case, that just doesn't appeal to me at all. So that's perfect. So one of the things that I like to talk about here is, how you're paying it forward. What are you doing to make a difference in other people's lives? I personally believe that when you help a business grow and profit, then you're helping that individual, you're helping their family, you're helping all the employees and their families, and you're contributing to the economy of that community at least. So that's huge in itself. But you've also written a book that I actually want to get my hands on. I'm supposed to haven't ordered it yet. Super Consumer: A Simple, Speedy, and Sustainable Path to Superior Growth. So where did all that come about? Where did the book come from, and how else are you contributing to humanity?
Yeah, it's really, what a great question. It's funny how the way that the consulting game works, it's kind of funny in that at a lot of firms, what they try to do is market a problem or a challenge. XYZ is coming, recession is coming, hyper competition is coming, and it's a little bit of a scare tactic of, you better watch out. Oh, and by the way, we have the protection or the solution for that, right? Which we won't tell you about. And I think academia is the same way in that they have ideas, and a lot of the kind of lingo and jargon that comes out is really meant to create distance between the smartest person and everybody else. Like, you got to learn the language, and if you don't learn it, then you can't play at our level. And one of the things that the reason why I wrote my book was, consumers are tricky, but there's patterns there. And actually, rather than just kind of hide these insights from the world and say, well, you got to pay me to figure out what they are, why don't I open source it? Because I actually think I would learn more from other people applying these theories than just kind of keeping it to myself. And so the super consumer theory is that, people know it as the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle. Like, 20% of a category's customers generate 80% of the revenue or the profit. But what the overlay that I have is that when you combine both the economics and the emotion, that there's a subset of consumers that spend a lot, but they care a lot about a category. They're not just, like if you have 3 teenage boys that you're caring for, you might spend a lot of money on sliced bread just to feed those boys, right? Because they're bottomless pits of eating.
Yeah.
You may not care about sliced bread as a category, but you're just spending a lot because that's what the life stage dictates and stuff. So I think that nuance of I care deeply about it and I spend a lot is really quite important, because what I found is that not only the most passionate and profitable people in the category are economically important, they're strategically important because they're the most proactive to tell other people, and they're the most prescient about what's coming next in the category. And so, like, one of the things that I always talk about is that whether it was craft beer or Keurig or Greek yogurt, these are all categories that you could have seen coming if you had looked at what the super consumers in those categories were actually spending. Like, if you could actually look at their receipts, you would have said, oh, this is obvious, this is going to be a big opportunity at some point down the road, because they're the canary in the coal mine or the tip of the spear. And that, to your point about paying it forward, what I was like, you know what? These insights are kind of the same around the world. They're the same in every category. And I don't get the chance to work with every company if I said you can't use these insights unless you pay consulting fees for it. Let me see if I can write all of these down and open source it and see what happens, because I think I'll maximize my learning from it. And that, you know what, sometimes the devil is in the details of, like, you might have the right idea, but some people still want help kind of executing the strategy in a way that it can be good for both of us there. And that's been kind of my goal, is that if I continue to write and do podcasts and speak about these ideas and just say, hey, these are the things that I've learned, let me put them out there in the ether for people to take and try to apply them, then I'm going to learn back from them in a way that makes me even more helpful to other people with that. And so that's been kind of my mindset. And I think it's been kind of an interesting thing when I have people reach out to me and like, hey, can I work with you as a consultant? I'm like, hey, I'll give you my uninformed answer right now. It's bereft of facts, but I'll tell you what I think the answer is. And if you still need help, that's great. But if you don't, then I'm happy to kind of say, bless you and good luck to you on your way with it there, because that's kind of one of the things that I found is that one of the best ways to be helpful is to be like a Costco sample is kind of what I call it, right? A lot of people go to Costco just to eat the samples that are there, and there you go.
Numbers in my hand. You can't see it.
Good.
Especially when I was in Hawaii, I was there by myself for about 8 months, and I used to just go to Costco just to get my lunch,
Absolutely.
I was walking around there. It was cool. But anyway.
The strategy works, because that's what I kind of believe, is that if you have something good that you think, A, it's good enough for people to want it again, and B, there's more of that where they came from. That's kind of how I treat my ideas and my consulting experiences. Like, I'll give away a sample, no problem, because there's a lot more where that came from, and I think that people will find it to be pretty good. And that abundance mentality, that spirit of generosity, I've actually found to be really great business as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in contrast to that, as you were talking about, what a lot of people do in our industry is they will tell the why, but they won't tell the how. And there's a lot of books out there that do that, quite frankly, as well. Whereas if for instance, I've been reading and listening to Tony Robbins for years. And then I finally went to one of his events, and it was, $1,000, the price tag for this event. And it was literally the same stuff I had heard him say on tape 15 years prior. But the whole experience of being there, I'll pay for it again and again and again, because people really want the leadership and they want that personal connection. Even though I was talking to a client, and this one client says, Wally, all the stuff you're sharing with me, I can go. Actually, he said, my brother told me that I can go find this 1,000 other places on YouTube and this and the other. I said, actually, your brother's wrong. If you search it, you'll probably find about 1 million hits, and you can find 1 million different ways and places to get the same information. But the strategy, the difference in working with me, and I'll say the same thing for you, I know for a fact, is I'm going to look at your business and tell you which strategies you need to implement right away. And oh, by the way, show you the step-by-step on how to do it. You can get all the information, but do you know how to put it together? But and there's so many other ways to look at it, but ultimately it all comes down to the abundance mindset. Why am I having a conversation that I'm going to post with you who does some of the same stuff in a different way? Because I have an abundance mindset. I can't work with everybody. You can't work. I don't want to work with everybody. Even if I could, it just feels better to share the wealth and just to have these conversations and learn from you.
Totally. No, and I think that's kind of the key is that I never planned to retire because I just have so much fun learning and working and stuff. And I think honestly, one of the things that really drove me to leave my old firm was, the learning opportunity was just stagnant because I was at the top. And I really craved the ability to be mentored by other people. And the thing that I realized was that, when you have to kind of focus on running a business and this and that, then there's not enough time for be it mentoring or learning, and that being out on my own, I get to pick who I collaborate with. I get to pick who I do these conversations with. And that just maximizes my learning opportunity. And that I think that the idea of like the traditional mentorship within one organization just really wasn't available to me anymore. But through the beauty of podcasts, the beauty of everything that's online and articles, like my ability to learn is infinite. And I think, as you said, like there's a different learning experience, reading something, listening to something, and then having an engaging relationship with something. It's totally different. They're
Completely
all
different.
and they're all valuable in a way that I think works really nicely together. So I'm totally with you on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, as you know, when you teach something, you literally get an opportunity to
Yes.
master that skill. That's the only way, in my mind, to master a skill is to teach somebody how to do whatever it is that you want to master.
Well, and I love that because what's funny is that I remember someone was describing something about a specific academic field, and I was asking about it, and the person stopped and was like, I can't explain it to you because you won't understand it. And I was in my mind, I was like, that's possibly true. Maybe I won't get it, but it's also probably true that if you can't explain a complex subject simply, then you haven't mastered it either.
Absolutely correct. You only know a subject to the extent that you can explain it to somebody else.
Yeah.
Period. That's brilliant. I absolutely love that. And I knew exactly where you was going when you said that. That's awesome. So, brother, we are at the point where we're going to pay it forward. You ready to do that, Eddie?
Yep.
Excellent. So share with our abundant leaders 1 to 3 actionable steps that they can take today.
So number one is the journaling part. That kind of, if you can start that practice of journaling, it doesn't have to be hard copy. It can be an online journal, could be a Word document. It doesn't really matter what it is. But without the gut punch moment that I went through that you were asking me about, Wally, like I just think it's so valuable that, we have probably forgotten so many pearls of wisdom about your career, what you do, then you realize, and that the only way to really crystallize that is to keep them in a journal and recognize it that way. And I think to this prior discussion about learning and really being able to master something, it's one thing to have gone through it. It's another thing to put it pen to paper and then to keep refining that skill. So that's kind of number one, is that journaling has been incredibly important for me personally, but also professionally. And I think that's kind of the point number one. Point number two is, as you see themes in your journaling, stuff that you're like, hey, you know what? This seems like an Isaac Newton-esque law of gravity thing in my field that seems to be more true than not. And that's going to be the shortcut for kind of really leapfrogging where you want to go in your career. And because I just find that when you come across these axioms in your field, that, you know what, in general, I don't have to know exactly what's going on, but I can lean on this, that more times than not, if I follow this theory, as it were, like my super consumers theory, that a small percent of the people drive the lion's share of the profit, but they're the most passionate, and they're the smartest people to learn from about what's next, then you're going to be fine. And that if when you have that, and then you get to the third part, is always be preparing for what I call that personal IPO, so that when you I've always found that, and I think what makes me so happy to hear about your journey as a solopreneur, Wally, is that I just find that when you have people who haven't journaled, they don't realize what the valuable pearls that they already have. And when they haven't kind of figured out their kind of theories for their career and their vocation, then they don't know how much value they actually have generated for other people. That working for one company for one salary is actually vastly underestimating your true value to the world there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, my hope is that more people do become these solopreneurs, with or without that gut punch moment of your daughter kind of writing, do I have a workaholic dad or not with it? But like that, those 3 steps, you journal, you figure out the kind of theories for success in your chosen career, and apply those successes, those theories into a situation where you can become, whether it's a lowercase e entrepreneur or a capital E entrepreneur, that personal IPO, it's so extraordinarily valuable because I think the ability to dictate how and with whom and when you want to work is so incrementally valuable. Like one of the things that I read, Wally, was that by the time you're 50, more than half of the employees or people who work that are 50 or above are going to be pushed out of their job or their career on terms not of their own choosing. Mm-hmm. And so I say, you know what, that's coming. You got to prepare for it, and you lay the groundwork so that you make the choice and jump when you want to versus being pushed off. And that's the thing that I feel so passionate about is getting started on that right now.
Yeah, man, that is absolutely huge. And guys, you hear me talk about journaling all the time, but Eddie just shared, and really, I learned a lot just from that conversation, just from what you just said, because that's a whole nother reason to journal, guys. You always hear me talking about journaling on a personal level and on a business level, but on a professional level, it takes me back to when I was an equal opportunity advisor, and people used to come to me with grievances, and I would ask them if they have been keeping a record, in essence, journaling of the events that are going on, so that you can have that, because you're going to be asked to chronologically share the events that occurred. But the importance of journaling in your professional life just makes so much sense, because you're going to have a chronological record of events that occurred in case you get reprimanded or anything of that nature. But then it takes it to a whole nother level. You took it to a whole different level. When it gets to the point to where you feel it is time for you to transition, you're going to have that information, and you're going to see trends that is going to be able to allow you to create your own category in that industry and go out on your own. And I love it.
Yeah, and I'm so glad to hear you talk about it. That it's a common theme, because one of the things that I found is that writing is a muscle, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. And in many respects, the ability to write well is such value in my career, but I think in careers in general. And it's just one of those things that I think the side benefit from journaling. It's almost like you journal and you get to stay healthy at the same time too. Yeah. It's one of those things that I think is really valuable. So
yeah, it absolutely is, and I talk about it often. I just never considered it from that regard. So thanks a lot for sharing that. It's really huge. What rituals make the biggest impact in your life, other than journaling, obviously?
Yeah, it's the other one that I found has been really quite helpful is I mentioned early on kind of being a good student of consumers and a good student of my family, but being a good student of myself has been quite helpful, both physically and emotionally and spiritually, just the things that keep me centered. And so like one of the things that's been super helpful for me is just getting better sleep. And for the better part of my career, when I was traveling a ton and stuff, I got 4 to 6 hours of sleep, and I'm not someone who can sleep in late, so I have to sleep in by going to bed earlier. And I tell you, like, just going to bed earlier has just made such a difference in my life, because I get more sleep. I don't eat late at night, so I'm not going to gain weight that way and stuff. But I don't know how to say other than taking care of my sleep and my sleep hygiene has made such a big difference for me. It's such an exponential impact in my life. And then the second thing is that, and this having lived on Oahu, but like I'm a big water guy. I can't always be in the ocean, but I'm constantly just looking for ways and opportunities to swim. So whether it's when I'm home and at a gym where I can get into the pool and just get in the water, that's great. Or when I travel, I'm very particular about picking hotels that have a pool, even if it's out of the way, just because I know that'll just make me feel better. Mm-hmm. So sleeping and swimming, in addition to journaling, keep me centered. So.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I like swimming as well. Obviously swam a lot when I was in Hawaii. We lived literally on the beach and was there almost every single day. And then now here, I'm at the pool just about every morning, getting my swim in. So I absolutely love it. What are you reading or listening to that you would recommend to our abundant leaders, and why, of course, other than your book?
Yeah. So the thing that one thing that I really have enjoyed reading is Ben Thompson of Stratechery. He writes it's a subscription-based email service that he has. He's based out of Taiwan, but he writes about tech companies and it's just really thoughtful. Like a couple times a week, he sends out a note, really thoughtful analysis of Google or Microsoft or Netflix, in just ways that I'm professionally jealous. I'm like, I wish I could write that way and stuff. And so I always learn a lot from him.
There's some guys out there. My mentor, for instance, Carl Bryan. I know he spends a lot of time on his little emails and blog posts and stuff, but they're just so hilarious and brilliant and so thought provoking. I'm just like, man, I'm like totally crushing on you and jealous, man, for real. So I have a couple guys that I follow like that too. I just really wish I could write like that. But in any case, I love consuming the content. What do you feel holds most people back from living a life of true abundance?
Well, the thing that I feel like holds people back is the underlying mentality that they have that they don't realize that they have. And so there's people who will say, yeah, abundant mentality, I want to have that. But what they don't realize is what they really firmly believe is that the world is zero sum. Mm. And the example that I always give is that everybody gives lip service to, if you run a business to consumer business, that consumers are important, but they don't realize that it's one thing to say that, it's another thing to truly have empathy to walk in their shoes with it. Whereas most people have a deep level of contempt for their consumers, and that, hey, I can take quality out of my product and no one will notice because I don't think consumers are actually that smart. Or I can get away with X, Y, and Z. Or even when I do my marketing, it's like, you know what? I just don't think they're going to understand it, and I can pull a fast one on them. And so the thing that I think at a very deep level, what holds people back is they don't realize the level of fear that they fundamentally have in both their business, but probably in life as well, that in order for me to win, you have to lose. Mm. I think that's a really deep-rooted sentiment that has to be excised out before you can really have a mindset of abundance there.
No, I totally agree with that. That is very profound that you said that. I 100% agree with that. So what does being a man of abundance mean to you?
Yeah, I think that it comes back to, when I talk about my growth strategy work, it's, the best way to do it, make the category bigger, make the pie bigger for everybody. Don't just grow your share of market, grow the market overall. So that's kind of, how I see it from a work perspective. And I think the other one at a personal level is the idea of, I had written, when Netflix had a bunch of problems in 2011, they had raised their prices and they were talking about separating their DVD business from their streaming business, and the stock had tanked 80%. And I had written a bunch of articles about how I actually thought that them raising price was a good thing. And I got a lot of hate mail online for that. But, my basic premise was I think they're going to raise their prices so that they can buy better content, because at the time their streaming content wasn't that good. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know they were going to create their own original content, but I think that idea of they raise prices so they can make the product better, that generosity loop has always been a very powerful growth strategy. And I think the idea that generosity at the root, the root word of it is generative. And I think the ability to create, or even Genesis at the beginning, like that same kind of etymology of the language there of like, when you are generous, it's because you are generative. And when you are generative, you have more to offer the world that in a way that maybe is offering something new to the world. And when you do those things, that your business is going to go well, but that every human being has the ability to be generative in a way that's unique to them. That's kind of what I firmly believe. And I think until you believe that you are distinctive and you have something distinctive to offer to the world, then it's very hard to kind of break out of the that zero-sum mindset that we talked about earlier.
Man, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Brother, we are going to close this up. We are definitely going to have eddiewoodgrow.com linked up in the show notes, and your book. We'll have a picture of it there, your amazing picture, everything linked up in the show notes. But before I let you go, What did we not talk about that you want to ensure abundant leaders get out of our conversation today, and any other ways that they can get more of you?
Yeah, no, I think this idea of gut punch, I keep thinking about that because it's such a visceral, image in my mind. Is my hope is that, even if I can't send everyone the yellow balloon that you got, Wally, is that, check out my daughter's book, not just because it's my daughter, but I just think that anyone who's working and who has a family or have loved ones that work feels like it takes away from time with them, to really digest that, the narrative she's telling. And again, maybe we'll find out 20 years later from when she's seeing a counselor if this was really about me or not with it. But my hope is that people kind of say, you know what, that whole kind of narrative that you told about the fisherman versus the American businessman, there's a choice that you can make right now to kind of live your best life and again, I totally agree, live an abundant life. And if you can do that, then, maybe you don't have to go through the awkward questions of, did your daughter just write about a workaholic dad who almost lost his family and not be about you and stuff? Go through that vicariously through my daughter's book, so that you don't have to go through it on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. The book could be about any number of men that I personally know, to include myself. Maybe even Eddie. I don't know. But we'll unpack that later. But it is a brilliant book. I definitely encourage you to get a hold of it. And Eddie, it's been a great conversation, man. Absolutely love it. Enjoy your time out there in beautiful Aloha and on the Big Island. And it's just been a pleasure. Go out, live your life of abundance. Keep paying it forward. And please make sure your daughter keeps paying it forward too. She's got more stories about you,
I know. They're all going to come out at some point or another, right? So.
Awesome.
Hey, thanks, Wally. This has been great. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun.
My pleasure. All right, guys, here's your action step for today, and we're going to make this really fun. I think it would be a great idea, and I'm going to do this as well, to ask one of your youngest children, or all of your children, or somebody else, maybe a niece, a nephew, or somebody else. I just want it to be a child, somebody in your life that's young. Ask him or her to write a short story about you, about what it is that you do. How do you spend your day? And listen, if they're so young that they don't know how to write, then just record it on an audio. Record it, and then you write it yourself so that you can have that information and share that with us. I don't want any videos of children on the Facebook group. I just have a problem with that because of things that have happened in my own life with my pictures of me and my child. So please refrain from any of those pictures. You can do that on your own page if you care to, but just don't put them in the group. Okay, I greatly appreciate that. Just put in audio and or write the text or take a picture of whatever it is that they write if they can write it for themselves. I think this is going to be really fun. That in itself, I feel, is going to be very eye-opening for many of us. And the really fun part is I would really love to hear some of those stories. If you're up to it, share those stories on our private Facebook group. You can either take a picture of the story and post it in there like that, or retype it out, or whatever you want to do, but somehow share that story, or at least a synopsis of the story, and share with us what you got out of that revelation, out of that story that child wrote about you and your day. If you're not already a member of the Men of Abundance Facebook group, then request access to the group. You can see it in the show notes, or just search Men of Abundance on Facebook and you'll find the group and the page. You can like the page, but also subscribe to the group. It used to just be for men, but now I've opened it up to men and women, since about 50% of the listeners of Men of Abundance are women. And we really want that perspective from both sides. So go ahead and do that. I think it's going to be a blast. I look forward to seeing your stories.